Today we're pleased to have with us Congressman Greg Steube from Florida.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And we'd like to talk about, get your insights, sir, on some issues involving Asia. And obviously one of the hot topics now, and it's been a topic for a while, is the PRC, the People's Republic of China.
Right.
And it poses a threat. You know, it's 5 years ago you didn't hear it so much, but these days everyone's talking about it. How do you see the threat, sir?
Well, look, John Ratcliffe, who is the head of D&I under the Trump administration before Trump got out of office, labeled the Chinese Communist Party as the #1 national security threat to the United States. And you can see it through intellectual property stealing. You can see it through aggression. You can see it through the buildup of their military. You can see that it is a true national security threat to the security and safety of the American people. And so that's how I view the Chinese Communist Party. I think the Biden administration's compromise with the Hunter Biden issues and the Chinese government paying them. They're not going to, the Democrats and the Biden administration are not going to be tough on China. They're not going to be tough on Chinese aggression. They're not going to be tough economically on China like the Trump administration was, which is unfortunate because the American people wanted that America First agenda. There were people that didn't like Trump for whatever reason, but they supported putting America first, putting American businesses first, bringing manufacturing back to the United States. The stealing of intellectual property that happens in businesses that go to China is a big challenge for our country. And it's unfortunate now that we have an administration that's not willing to take that on.
You know, that is troubling. I did think the Trump administration was the best one that I've seen in the 30 plus years that I've been following. In one area that you've been particularly active in, sir, is the effort to keep Chinese subversion influence out of America's higher education system. Could you explain on what the problem is and what you're doing?
Yeah, so we've seen it just in Florida. It's happening all across the country, but we've seen examples of it in Florida where you have Chinese Communist Party paid professors who are being paid by the Chinese Communist Party who infiltrate our American university system. There was 4 of them that were fired at UCF in the middle part of the state of Florida for selling secrets, for getting information back to the Chinese government. There was a cancer center in Florida called the Moffitt Cancer Center that their executives were giving their research back to the Chinese Communist Party. So a bill that I've put in place is that if somebody's working for a university, they can't also be getting paid by the Chinese Communist Party. And if they do divulge information back to the Chinese Communist Party from the United States, it's a felony. And so upping those type of crimes and coming down on universities that are hiring these people. Also, if they don't get rid of these people, that university loses federal funding, which is a really big deal to universities. Obviously, under the Democratic House, the bill's not going to go anywhere, but I think we're setting ourselves up to be able to, when the Republicans take the majority back in 2022, be able to move a bill like that through the process.
I believe that Columbia University had some issues in this regard, sir.
Yeah, it's a lot more systemic than people think it is.
With the Confucius Institutes, I know you've had an interest in those.
Right.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. So these Confucius Institutes get their tentacles onto campuses in trying to teach Chinese culture, Chinese Mandarin, different languages, and they get a foothold into the universities. And then the people that are being paid through the Chinese Communist Party who work at these institutions are then funneling information back to the Chinese Communist Party. We're seeing it all over. We're seeing it in businesses where they steal intellectual property, and you're seeing it in research with vaccine research. You're seeing it in medical research like the Moffitt Cancer Center in Florida. And that's not the type of behavior that we should be allowing another country to happen here in the United States. And again, Trump was very strong on pushing against Chinese aggression, but unfortunately the Biden administration hasn't been.
Why is that, do you think?
I think it's because they're compromised. I mean, we know that the Chinese Communist Party paid Hunter Biden and their family for, I think it's $1 billion over a course of period of time. So obviously they're compromised in that particular instance. But I have struggled trying to understand why the Biden administration has taken the direction they have. A lot of foreign policy like Iran, Israel, and others, instead of being aggressive towards Russia, China, and Iran, they're embracing them. They're wanting to open talks back up. They're wanting to get back in the JCPOA in the Iran deal, which is not good for the security and safety of the American public. So I can't answer that. I wish the administration would answer that question, but we shouldn't be helping out our enemies, helping out the Russians who just hacked the Colonial Pipeline, and then we're going to give them the Nord Stream 2, we're going to give them their pipeline and remove the sanctions that we had in place, the Trump administration had in place there. That's not the type of behavior the administration should be taking.
Yeah, it does seem familiar. It's if you remember Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
You've seen it.
There are a lot of parallels
a little bit there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have a happy ending. So Bob, you were in the Army.
Yes.
And so you know, in the Army is, sort of South Korea is the Army's place. You know, the Marines have some other places, which I was. But with the Korean Peninsula, could you give us your sense of the importance of the peninsula to, say, U.S. security, to really the civilized world in Asia?
When I was in the Army, I was stationed in Hawaii. So obviously the South Pacific and East Asia is very important to the missions that I had over there. South Korea is very important to the national security interests of the United States for a variety of reasons. One, their geographic location to China and the South Pacific. And if you see China take aggressive action towards, say, Taiwan in the next period of years, which a Trump administration would be very strongly against, you would see the whole region start to turn red from the Chinese Communist Party. And then the few allies that we have, Japan, South Korea, by themselves couldn't take on the threat from the Chinese military. So we need to continue to encourage the coalition that we have with South Korea, continue to work with them militarily and our partners in Japan, because the Chinese aggression is real. Their building of their defense and their military is very real. And we should be taking a much different aspect to that than we are right now.
The one aspect of South Korea, sir, that a lot of people don't understand on the U.S. side is that we think that the relationship is rock solid, as you hear, because we fought the war with the South, alongside the South Koreans, and the expression is forged in blood. But the current South Korean administration, the Moon JaeIn administration, is a very leftist regime. And if you listen to what they've said in the past, what they say now, it seems very pro-North Korea, pro-China, and I'm very much in favor of appeasing North Korea. And in fact, the most likely candidate for Moon's party for next year's presidential election has referred to the Americans on the peninsula as an occupying force. And what sort of a concern should that be for the U.S. government?
That should be very concerning to not just South Koreans, but to the United States government. Because again, back to if China takes over that area of the world, or leaders in South Korea or in Japan or otherwise are appeasing China, you're going to have some significant national security issues, not just for South Korea, but for the United States and for the world. So that's certainly not the direction that I believe we should be taking, or that South Koreans should be taking.
Would you think, sir, that there's justification for relaxing sanctions on North Korea as a way to encourage good behavior from their side?
I would not support that. I don't think that's the direction that you should take to a totalitarian regime. So hopefully that's not the direction that they go.
Well, hopefully not. But and I also noticed you'd put in a bill, sir, perhaps it didn't pass, about the USS Pueblo, which if you're old enough, you remember that. I remember it very well. Maybe you, maybe less so.
Well, what's interesting is I have the second most heavy veteran community district in the country. And I actually have a veteran who served on the Pueblo. And obviously very big issue to him to bring the Pueblo back. It's unfortunate the Democrats aren't even willing to pass a resolution that says you have taken our vessel, you need to return it. And so it still sits, from what I've been told, it sits as a museum in North Korea. And I wish our administration would take a stronger approach to things like that. But having veterans in my district that actually served on the Pueblo, that vessel needs to be returned to the United States.
And so, looking forward, what would you see? What would you see the United States doing with partners, perhaps, to really take on this Chinese aggression ultimately?
Well, we need to stand with Taiwan. We need to stand with Australia. We need to stand with other coalition entities that we have in the region. Because if, say, Taiwan were to fall, you would see those different countries not be able to withstand the military might of the Chinese Communist Party. Anything the Chinese does that's aggressive in nature or violates national security interests of the United States, we should be taking a much more stronger approach to. And unfortunately, the Biden administration is just kind of laying over backwards and letting them do what they want to do. It's like Russia. They talk a strong game, but they don't do anything. And then the things that they do is actually rewarding the Russian government by, giving sanction relief on Nord Stream 2. So that isn't the type of direction that we should be going as a country.
Yeah, well, those are definitely perplexing decisions.
I can't understand, if you cared about our country, why you would make those type of determinations.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, sir.
Thanks so much for having me today.
It's it is sort of refreshing to know that we have people in Congress who have such a clear sense of what's needed for the.
Well, I think there'll be more of us in 2022, so hopefully we'll take the House back.
I hope so. But I appreciate it very much. Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.